Well, good morning, everyone. Just to let you know, coming up on August 18th, we are going to be doing a church-wide cookout because it's been a while since we ate, hamburgers and hot dogs together. And we're also going to be kicking off a new series as well. So school starts that a week previous, and so that's going to be like our back to church event. But we're also going to be talking a lot about church in general. Okay, and we've got a lot of cool stuff coming up for our church, and we're going to be talking about that really kicking off on August 18th. And so we're going to be talking about, we reformulated the mission a little bit and the vision, and so we're super excited about that. The series is going to be called Intentionally Elevate, right? Because whenever we change things or do things, like we want to be doing it for a reason, to be able to intentionally elevate, like how we minister to people and how we grow and how we disciple. But then we're also going to look beyond the church into our own lives as well, because so often we have things in our lives that we wish or that we intend to do, but we don't do it, right? Because we have to be intentional about it. So that series is going to be called Intentionally Elevate, and we're going to invite whoever we can. We're going to open up to the community and bring your friends, families, all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to be doing food. Daniel and Larry are going to be cooking their magical hamburgers. And so we're going to be having that right after service. So stay and eat there as well. We're also going to be asking for half of y'all to bring desserts, the other half to bring sides. And so communication is going to go about that, depending on where where your last name falls. And we like to do that every so often because we're a church that likes to worship together, but we also like to eat together as well. And so that's going to be August 18th. And so super excited about that. But that also means that we've been changing things for a little while now because we've been working with leaders through DBA as well to look at like how are we as a church doing and what can we improve on so that we can reach our community and disciple our church as well. And so there's some things are little changes, some things are big changes, right? But how can we be more inviting? How can we help those who are far from Christ know Him? How can we help the church that we have? How can we help disciple and grow them? And how can we, especially when you invite somebody new, how can we help them cut down on their anxiety? Because remember the first time that you went to a church? Right? It was kind of like, okay, what do I do when I walk in the doors, and where do I go, and what do I do with my kids, and how long is the service, and what do I wear, and what do they sing, and do they smell, and do I like them? And so we try to cut down on things like that. For example, right? For the first time when you walked in here, you might have been like, okay, I like this looks nice, like everything looks clean, all that, but where are the bathrooms? Well, so it's like, why don't we just put up a sign that says where the bathrooms are, right? And so we did. And so it's just like, it can be like little things like that, but starting to think through, like through the eyes of someone that's been coming here a while, as well as people that have been here for a long time, right? And so super excited about that series. Our leadership's super excited about that series. And so we've got that coming up on August 18th. Like Angie said, we did a lock-in. The students, you all are very awake, right? Very, right. All right. So I've got a couple of pictures up there that we're just going to roll through. You can just roll through those, Grant, from the lock-in. But just to give you all an idea of what we did, and we had a number of students that came. The whole idea was comedy night live, and we talked about improv. And so there were games that were related to just that. And so the students had to get on stage and act that out, which can be quite nerve-wracking as well. But each one of them did it, and they did it wonderfully and awesome. And so we had games like that where they just had to come up with things on the spot. We did just fun games that they love to play in general, like the trash can game, and nobody got injured, and that was wonderful. We did s'mores outside as well in the courtyard at like 11 o'clock at night, so they had a lot of fun with that. We found out that Logan, that kid, went through like half a bag of just marshmallows. It was incredible, actually. And so we found out that Sadie likes chocolate. Who knew? Did you know? I didn't know. I mean, she likes sweets. And so they had different skits they had to prepare, but then we also did worship as well. I don't have any of worship because I was involved with that, but that was a really, really cool experience, and to see the students that were worshiping in that way was really quite phenomenal. And so we basically had a church service during the lock-in, and it was awesome. I mean, they had hand motions. It was quite amazing, and so it was a lot of fun. And so just to kind of, again, show you, like, we love our students. We pour into them. Angie talked about the offering, right? The students didn't have to pay for that. We try to make things as free as we can because that way we just want to be able to minister to everyone, right? And so those students are a lot of fun. Most of them made it the entire night. We watched Shrek together as well. Some of them fell asleep during that. I think I fell asleep for like 40 minutes. And then we just went on with Monsters Incorporated. But your kids are creative. They are smart. They are just absolutely wonderful. And so we see that from those that are in Treehouse, and then they get a really good knowledge of the Bible and character skills. And then when they make it to Refuge, just to see how smart and how wonderful they are. They had a rap battle as well with nursery rhymes. That's what Crosby's doing there. And to see that, right? Just how spectacular these kids are. So if you do want to volunteer, it doesn't have to be an all-nighter, right? We had Kenny. They enlisted Kenny to come and to help out with it. And so just being able to have Kenny there to help run games or to help pick up when we were done with an activity is a huge thing. And that takes place on Sunday nights as well. And so if you want to be a part of Refuge or the youth group and help us there, that's awesome because these kids, they're just fantastic, right? And so just love them and get to see how great they are. So maybe sometime they will rap for you all, right? Yeah? Yeah? I think Elsa wants to. I can see it in her eyes. Okay. All right. So here we go. We're going to be in Daniel. We're finishing up the book of Daniel today. A couple months ago to set this all up. And you can turn to Daniel 12 if you want. That's where we're going to be. Last chapter. We've been looking at it book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. And while you're turning there, a couple months ago, I was at work. And for those of you that don't know, I do personal training and nutrition as well at a club. And so I was there and I was talking with one of our new trainers, and part of our job is to train people and help them with their health and their nutrition. But the other part is, of course, you have to do, sales and talk to people, answer their questions, and they sign up. But there's a sales component. When you're brand new and you don't have any clients and you don't have any money coming in, it can be hard. And so I asked her, hey, how do you like working here so far? And she said, like, I love what I do, and I love the people. I just didn't know that it was going to be so hard. And as we finish up our study on Daniel this morning, again, he's in his 80s at this point in his life with where we are in the story. And I think if we were to ask him to reflect on his life and all that he's seen and experienced and what God has showed him and what just the whole breadth of it, he might very well say, like, I love how I've seen God at work and what he's done and how he's answered my prayers and how he's come through time after time. But I didn't think my life would be this hard. Because when he was a youth, remember, he was in Israel. He was in the land of Israel, and he was surrounded by friends and family and his people, and they were in the land that God had given to them. And was it perfect? Definitely not. And there was political tension and turmoil and infighting and all that kind of stuff. But there was a comfort associated with it. And now, Babylon came in, they took out Israel, they deported a bunch of people, including him, and moved him all the way to Babylon. And so he's been there, and then he has been in a pagan culture, and that's been a struggle. He's had his life on the line numerous times. And then the Persians came in, and they defeated the Babylonians. And so, fast forward to 70 years later, and this guy's in a far distant place than he'd ever thought he'd be in. And so he's had to rely on his faith to carry him through extremely difficult times and trying circumstances, like mentally and emotionally and even maybe spiritually sometimes. And so maybe you're here and your life hasn't quite gone the way that you thought it was going to go. Maybe you're in a difficult circumstance right now, or you've been through experiences and situations that you never thought you'd have to go through back when you were 15 or your youth, back when you were 5 years old, right? And so you're starting to experience these things, or you've gone through these experiences, and you're like, I didn't think that my life would be this hard, especially when I have God. And so if that's you, you're a lot more like Daniel than perhaps you realize. But here's the other thing about Daniel. He's seen God use him and work in his life in unimaginable ways. And I'm guessing that if you're here and you stay close to God and going through those types of times, you will too. I wrote in the Friday email that goes out a couple weeks ago, and if you don't have that, let us know. We'll get your email, and then you can have that also. But me or Brad usually put some thoughts on there, and I explained it with the students as well on Friday night, that oftentimes we want to see, when you're going through difficult circumstances, you want to see God at work in your life. And so you're praying, God, show me something, or God, come through, or God, I just need you to give me a sign. And so we pray those types of prayers. But often when you look at the people in Scripture who receive those types of prayers, you don't want to be in the same situation or circumstance that they were in. And so we want to see Jesus work a miracle in our life. But if you look at the people to who he worked those miracles to, do you really want to be blind to experience sight? And do you really want to lose a leg or not have it work to be able to be healed? Again, if you're following him, do you really want your back against the sea with your enemy coming at you and your life on the line to really experience God parting your seas? And so we want the types of answers that people get in Scripture, but we oftentimes don't want to go through the same types of circumstances, and that's fine because we're human and we don't want to go through the difficulty and the pain and all of that. But again, I'm saying that when you're in those times, sometimes it's just your faith that's going to carry you through, and sometimes you get an answer like Daniel does, but sometimes you don't. But if you're going through life and you're in those difficult circumstances that you never thought you'd be in, oftentimes we're more like Daniel than we realize. And we're about to close out the book of Daniel in this very last chapter, and I'm going to give to you right up front where we're going to go, because Daniel, he gets a glimpse of what's to come, but he doesn't get the full story. He's gotten that throughout these last number of chapters. And so here's the point that we're walking away with today. Sometimes the glimpse is all you get, but the glimpse is all you need. And sometimes God will just drop just enough in. And we want the whole story. We want everything written out. We want all the test answers. But he just gives us a little bit because he's like, that's all you need for right now. Because he knows if we got everything, then we might take a different path. Because I'm guessing if Daniel got told when he was 15, here's what's going to happen to you, he might have taken a different path, not realizing how hard it was. And so to give you a bit of the background timeline, many of you have heard this before, but we're just going to refresh real quick. 605, the Babylon and the allies, their allies go in, they defeat Assyria. Assyria was the most powerful nation at that point. They had threatened Israel and then Judah, the northern and southern kingdoms. Babylon comes in. They take out the northern kingdom first. They move down. They take out Judah. When they defeat Judah, when Babylon defeats Judah, there's a first deportation. They take away those that are the best, the brightest of Israel, basically. And they move them over to Babylon. They set up a puppet king in 597. There's a little bit of a revolt, so Babylon comes back down, hits Judah again, and takes away more people. In 586, there's one more revolt. Finally, Babylon is like, you know what? We've had enough of this small little problem state. And so they come in, they destroy the temple, they destroy the city of Jerusalem, and then there's a third deportation. All that's left is basically the poor and the worst off of the society that they leave behind at that point. And then a lot of it, the whole scene basically, for the most part, shifts over to Babylon, where the remnant is. In 539, Persia comes in, defeats Babylon. We looked at the night that happens. It's recorded in Daniel, and it also is corroborated by what ancient historians tell us as well, right? And so it's along the Euphrates River, and one of their things is to divert the Euphrates River. Persia does, and so they are able to take Babylon that way pretty much without a fight at all. And so within just those the short years, right, Babylon has this amazing wealth, this amazing strength, but in a very short time, they lose their power to Persia. And so again, the Persian Empire, if we go to the next one, that's going to show the extent to which they ruled, which was the greatest empire that had been there to that time, all the way down to Egypt, all the way over to Macedonia, until they make a guy named Alexander really, really mad, and he starts to, in a very short amount of time as well, he will take over that entire empire with Greece coming on the scene, right? But so we're in Babylon, right? And so Daniel is here. Jerusalem is here. They shifted him across Fertile Crescent over here. He's been here the last number of years. And so now we're going to zoom in to this section, and this is overlaid with a modern-day map. But Babylon is here. If we were going to look at Baghdad for Iraq, it'd be just north a little bit. And so here's Babylon, and we're going to see where we saw in chapter 10 that Nehemiah goes over the Tigris River. And so again, you see it's just a little bit north or northeast of where he's at. But he probably went there with people to pray. It might have been during a feast time, but he's made the trip over there. If you were to drive there today, I want to say it's like an hour and a half-ish. If you were walking it at that point, it'd probably be about 17 hours, so probably 2 to 3 days of a hike over there. But that's where Daniel's at. He's on the bank of the Tigris River, just north of Babylon. And while he's there, this event happens. It actually starts in chapter 10. It says, on the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I looked up. And there before me was a man dressed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist, and his body was like topaz, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches. Who does this sound like when you know the story of Revelation? Right? So eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. And so he's face to face with this one who appears to be the Son of Man, and the angel Gabriel comes and gives Daniel a message. And then in chapters 10 and 11, the future of Israel is laid out. In chapter 10, Daniel is told of the spiritual warfare that's going on behind the scenes, which is always important to know. Because sometimes, again, we tend to realize we look just at the physical, but oftentimes there is spiritual warfare going on behind the scenes, and it can affect us in ways that we don't always realize. And so sometimes it might affect you in your relationships with other people, and you might just be more frustrated with them. I've told this story before about how when we first started ministry, like every Saturday night, me and Angie would just get mad at each other for like the stupidest things. And then as I was talking with another pastor, he was like, oh yeah, my wife and I did, like we would fight all the time when we first started too. It's like there's like spiritual warfare going on there. And once we realized it, all of a sudden it just kind of like faded away. Right? But there is a spiritual component to our lives. And so in chapter 10, Daniel is told of that there's spiritual warfare going on behind the scenes. In chapter 11, it's filled with war and includes nations, the king of the north and king of the south. And it goes into a lot of details, but there's also a lot of ambiguity that goes with it also. And so here we are in chapter 12, and Daniel's just been told all of these things about what's going to happen and what's to come. And there's some details, but there's a lot of ambiguity to it. And so it continues in chapter 12. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress, such as not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. Some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Now, put in the historical context, who's in view here? It's the Jewish people, right? But here's the point. We are all physical beings, but we're also spiritual beings. And at some point, we all will be judged. Either we'll receive everlasting life or shame and everlasting contempt. And as Genesis and Romans and most of the other books of the Bible point out and teach us, all of us are tainted by sin. Even Daniel, who's had an amazing journey and walked by faith so many times, we looked previously at how he said he went to his window and he prayed and he confessed his sin. And so we all have sin in our lives, and so we are against a holy and righteous and perfect God. And so all of us naturally fall into the shame and everlasting contempt category. It's only by God's grace that he brings us into the light of his Son, Jesus Christ. And it continues, those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens. And those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase in knowledge. And so this message ends, and he tells Daniel, this revelation to you is finished, and so go ahead and roll it up. And then the author would run his seal along the bottom to guarantee its authenticity and its truth. And people, he mentions, will try to figure out more and more how that end is going to play out, how chapters 10 and 11 and 12 are going to go, and when it's going to happen, will it happen? And the point is that we can have guesses, but we have to be okay with the tension, because that ultimate part, we've gotten glimpses, but it hasn't totally been revealed yet. And that's the really hard part about life with God, living with the tension. It's the tension of, will things work out how I planned, or how I feel like God is leading me? It's the tension of what happens when my spouse leaves me? What happens when my children seem to be abandoning their faith? If God is for me, then why does school feel so hard and I can't understand chemistry or math? If God is for me, how come I feel like I'm struggling and I didn't get the job or get that promotion or get in that school or make that team or get chosen for that role in the play? There's always a tension to life with God. Because yes, he's all powerful, and yes, he's all knowing, and yes, he's in control. But when we don't get that role, or we don't get that promotion, or get the job, or we get dumped, or whatever it is that we're struggling with, wrestling with our mind day after day, knowing that he's in control, but how come I'm in this situation, it wears on us. And you feel that anxiety, and you feel that tension of, if God is for me, then how come it still feels like everything is against me? And so knowing he's in control, and knowing he has a plan, it gives us peace. It drops a little bit of peace in, but it's still hard. And that's okay, because remember, John the Baptist felt the tension. Remember, he's Jesus' cousin. He's grown up with him. He's seen the promise. But John the Baptist was also in prison, a place he didn't expect to be. And so he sent his disciples one time to ask Jesus, hey, are you really the one? Like I remember the Spirit coming down. I remember that part. And I heard the voice from heaven, this is my son, but the present circumstance has me a little confused. And what does Jesus say? Essentially he just says, look what I've done. Like, Jesus doesn't argue with him, doesn't give him a list of reasons. He just says, look what I've done. Draw your own conclusions. Sometimes we need to look at what God's done in our past, and that gives us the peace. Continue going on. I bet Daniel had to use that time after time as well to say, okay, so here's what God has done in the past of Israel. Right? He rescued them out of Egypt. He parted the sea. He led them through the wilderness. He removed the nations that were in the land before him, even though the numbers had us at a disadvantage. He's come through. Our God has come through time after time after time. And I think that's what fed a lot of Daniel's faith, to continue to go forward and to live in a place that was very much pagan and very much against who his God was and who the people were. Because he's like, if we can make it in Egypt, I think we're going to be okay in Babylon. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river, Tigris, one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? So he sees two other men, angels, who are standing on each side of the Tigris River, and one of them asks a question to this guy, and the man clothed in linen, who's above the waters of the river, second time, above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time, when the power of the holy people has been finally broken. All these things will be completed. Time, times, and half a time means 3.5 years. He's saying that's how long this persecution is going to be really, really intense. And so imagine you're in that conversation. chapters 10, 11, and 12, and you're hearing what all goes on. Because Daniel's heard all of these visions of the world powers and that it would go, even throughout his life, right? That it would go to Babylon and then Persia and then Greece and then Rome, but he's barely hit Persia, and so he doesn't really have an understanding of Alexander the Great and Greece and Rome after that. He's heard of the wicked, or gotten little drops of this guy to come, the Roman Antiochus Epiphanes, and how horrible this guy is going to be, but that's going to be hundreds of years later. And he has no idea about the ministry of Christ that's going to come. Doesn't have an idea about the dark ages to come. He hasn't heard anything about how fast technology is going to go. So he doesn't know anything about the finding of a new world and the settlement, and doesn't have anything about the Revolutionary War here, or the one that's going to happen in France, and the development of things like telephones and bombs and the internet and all of that stuff. Like, he has no concept of all that and what's going to happen, and understanding atoms, the galaxies, no fast how idea the world is going to progress. But he's hearing about these things called the end times. And so how much of that would you be able to comprehend? And so I love Daniel because he lets us know that he's in the same boat. He says, I heard, but I did not understand. Have you ever had an I heard, but I did not understand moment in your life? God, I heard you to tell me to do this. I heard you tell me to do this, but now I'm in a really tough position, and things are hard, and I just don't understand. God, I heard you when you called me, but I didn't understand just how hard it was going to be. Daniel's like, I don't get this all. So he's like, so I asked, my Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? Because Daniel's like, I don't get all this, so just tell me, what's the outcome? I find much of my walk with God is oftentimes hearing but not understanding. Sometimes, again, if we know the full weight of how difficult something is, we might not actually start down that path. And so he replied, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. And so the answer that Daniel gets is pretty similar to what we often get. What's going to happen is going to happen. It's like some will be made righteous, and they will seek to grow in their faith and their walk with God. But others who are wicked are going to continue to live that way. He's like, but to really understand all of this, you got to be righteous. And the reason, again, is we're both physical and spiritual beings. And so you can be the greatest, smartest person in the physical realm, but if you don't know anything about the spiritual, you've hit your limit. You're missing an entire component to your life. But you can be mediocre in the physical and even mediocre in the spiritual, but you've already got more knowledge as you continue to try and grow, because that's making you wiser than so many others. You've got both. You got glimpses of the spiritual. And so notice Daniel asked God one question. In other words, God tells Daniel asks God one question, but he doesn't necessarily get the answer that he expects. God tells Daniel what he needs to know, not what Daniel necessarily feels that he's entitled to know. And a lot of times people get frustrated with the Bible or with God, and we're like, how come you're not answering my questions? How come you're not telling me what I need to know or what I feel like I should know? And it might be things in life, but it's also very basic things. Because I bet most of us have had questions about what in the world happened with the dinosaurs? Or what about aliens? What about ghosts? Because it seems real on the Sci-Fi Channel. And so we ask these questions, and we're like, well, how come the Bible doesn't tell us things like that? It's not the point of the Bible, right? It's God's revealed word to us to tell us what we need to know. And sometimes, as Daniel finds out, that's the reason that we don't get the sign we want or the answers that we're praying for. It's because he gives us what we need. But he does leave Daniel with one timeline, a sort of countdown clock. In verse 11, it says, "From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up." So again, we saw that earlier, the abomination that causes desolation. And so we saw that with Antiochus Epiphanes in Rome, but this seems to be something further down the line in view. So there will be 1,290 days. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. He says, "Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of 1,335 days. As for you, Daniel, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance." And so he's saying from the time that person, whoever it is, sets up and just breaks their treaty with Israel, and there is basically makes himself God in the temple or the focus of their worship. And when that happens, and the worst thing that could possibly be for God's people happens, there's going to be 1,290 days. He's like, but if you wait another 45, then you're really going to be blessed. And that's all Daniel gets. And so the book opened with Daniel as a 15-year-old, closes with him in his 80s. And throughout it all, he showed others how to remain faithful to God in a pagan culture, both those who knew him, like Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, and he was a good example to others as he ruled territories for Babylon, for Persia later. But he shows that God is in control and that he does have a plan, and Israel's time in Babylon was now over. And they're under Persian rule. And there's going to be more persecutions to come, but ultimately God's going to bring them through it all, and he's like, there's going to be another age coming, and one that is righteous, and it's holy, and there's no more wickedness, and there's no more crying, and there's no more shame. And throughout the centuries since, we've seen how the predictions and the prophecies in the book of Daniel have come true, and that leads us to know that the future yet to come will be true as well. All right, to let us know that we can have the confidence and the strength to keep following God even when it feels like we're miles apart from where we thought we would be. And that we can have peace no matter what we're going through today, no matter what we're facing. There's a time coming when all will be good and perfect and wonderful and holy, and we'll be with God in his kingdom. And we get a glimpse of it all in Daniel. Sometimes a glimpse is all you get, but sometimes that's really all you need. And so as we finish up the book of Daniel, that's the message, right? No matter what your circumstances in life, no matter what it throws at you, know that your God, the God of Abraham and Moses and Jacob and David and Daniel, is in control, and he has a plan for his people. He just laid it out, and you are sons and daughters of the King. Christ died for you, and he might not give you all the answers you want at the time, but he will see you through it. So that just leaves one final question, which is, okay, that feels good, but what do we do in the meantime? And we just follow Daniel's example. We do exactly what Daniel did, right? He prayed. He lived for God the best he could, where he could, in whatever situation he was in, and whatever he was facing. Didn't matter if he was over certain locations on the map at that time in government. Doesn't matter if he was in a pit with a lion facing death. He was just like, I'm just going to live for God wherever I can at the time, no matter if my circumstance is great or if I'm literally in the worst place to be in the world. So he doesn't give up on his faith. He just made sure to guard it and to actively live it out the best he could. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for Daniel and how it's recorded so that we can see someone who had greatness in life, but also faced things that we have no desire or would ever want to face. But through it all, we see someone who kept his faith. And so we ask that you would help us keep ours as well, that we would be okay with not having all the answers. But I do ask that when we're in pain and struggling or just need wisdom, that you would give us glimpses. And if that's all we need, then thanks. And if you want to give us more, then we are definitely grateful. And so for those here that are struggling, I ask that you would give them glimpses and peace. Give us wisdom and help us to have a faith that is so active that we can follow you in the greatest highs and in the worst lows. So thank you. In Christ's name, amen.